You're watching free content from Digital Tutors, the world's largest CG training library. Enjoy the tutorial and visit Digital-Tutors.com to find thousands of videos streaming in HD.
In this lesson, we'll learn how to create a basic book file to manage our documents with, as well as how we can control the pagination within the book file. Okay, so in the previous lesson, we went through how we can use a document template to quickly set up chapters for this book that I'm working on. Now you can see here that I've got chapters 1 through 5 completed here. I've got them all open here in InDesign. You can see all their tabs up here at the top. Now, if we want to be able to manage all these different files that we're creating for this one project from one central location, then we need to create what InDesign calls a book file. Now, the advantage to creating a book file is that we can actually share things like styles, master pages, and even swatches for these various documents back and forth. So let me go ahead and show you how to create one of those files here. We're going to come up to File. We're going to choose New. And I'm going to go ahead and choose Book. It's the second option here. And now that this dialog opens, we'll go ahead and name our book. I'm just going to go ahead and type in a name here. Let's just call it DT_book. And you can see here that the save as type is listed as book. So we'll go ahead and save that in the Lesson 3 project files folder here. And let's just hit save. And you can see what happens here. InDesign goes ahead and opens up a panel for the new DT_book file that we've created here. Now, if you've ever used libraries here in InDesign, this panel may look a lot like a library, but the functionality is actually quite different. So let me go ahead and drag this down here, and we'll come back to this here in just a moment. What I want to look at here are these 5 open chapter files. Now, these are also located in the Lesson 3 project files folder if you want to open these up and work along with me. Now, I want to show you a few things about these. Notice that each one of these chapters I've set up, and it's got sort of a chapter cover page here that has kind of a chapter intro on it as well as the chapter number, and then some little markers for the number of sections inside that chapter. So as I go ahead and cycle through these documents here, notice that every one of these chapter cover pages is always going to be on a right-hand page or an odd numbered page here. Now, in terms of the length of each one of these chapters, notice that the way they are currently ordered as far as the pages goes, they all start at page 1. And this is how they would currently be if you had created them from a document template. And they go through whatever number of pages that chapter has. You can see this chapter has 6 pages. Chapter 5 has 9 pages. So it's page 1 through 9 and so on and so forth. Now, one thing we need to pay attention to here is the fact that these chapters can either end on a left-hand page or a right-hand page, and that is completely determined by the amount of content in that chapter. That's going to matter here in just a moment once we get these files into our book. But let me go ahead and close these out for right now. I'm going to go ahead and just click that little X on the tab. We'll close all those out, and let's go ahead and grab our book file here. I'm going to go ahead and show you how we can begin adding these files into our book. Now, you'll see here that there's several buttons down here at the bottom of this panel. Most of them are grayed out, but we do have a little plus button here that can be used to actually add files to our book. So we'll go ahead and click that. Let's go ahead and add chapter 1 here. Go ahead and hit open. And you can see that that actual chapter 1 file appears here inside our DT_book. Now we have our file name as well as the page range that is included within that file. Now, that's not the only way that we can add files to our DT book. Let me come over here to the little panel flyout menu, and I'll choose Add Document here. We'll get that exact same dialog. We'll add chapter 2 that way. And you can see that it adds it right below the selected chapter that I had already brought in with the little plus button down here. Now, let me go in here. I'll just click off that, and let me show you another way we can add chapters to our book. I'm going to come over here and just drag in a Windows Explorer window here. We can actually just drag these in from either Windows Explorer or Finder if you're on a Mac. Let's just go ahead and grab chapter 3. We'll drag it in and drop it into that panel. We'll drag and drop chapter 4 as well as chapter 5 here. We've got all 5 of those chapters inside our DT_book file here. Now you can see here that since we have multiple files in here now, we have several other buttons that are available to us. The first thing I want to bring your attention to here is that InDesign is automatically managing the pagination of these files. You can see here chapter 1 is pages 1 through 9. Chapter 2, instead of starting over at page 1, it's actually starting at page 10, going through page 17. Now, these are actually being managed because we have the automatic page numbering options set with these documents. Let me come over here to the panel flyout menu. I'll just choose document numbering options with my chapter 2 set. You can see here that it automatically opens that file here. And you can see here that we had automatic page numbering selected here inside the document numbering options. Let me cancel this out and close this file. Alright, great. So now that we have all 5 of these files added to our DT book, we can actually reorder these files in any way we want to. Maybe we wanted chapter 1 to be at the end. Let me just click and drag it down here below chapter 5. You can see that the pagination automatically adjusts itself, giving chapter 1 rather, page number 33 through 41. If we wanted to remove one of these chapters from our book, all we would need to do is click on the little minus sign right here, and we can remove that. I actually don't want to remove that, so let me just drag chapter 1 back in, and I'll drop it in there. And there it goes. We'll go ahead and drag that up to the top of the book, so it's our pagination is restored to its original condition here. So now with all of these files in here, I want to bring your attention to this left-hand column here. Now, the way a book works, because I mentioned that we actually have the ability to share things like styles and master pages, even swatches between other documents. The way a book works is that one of these documents in our book is considered the style source. Now, this style source is looked to by the book when the book is synchronized to give things like styles, master pages, swatches, and so on and so forth to the other documents in the book. And we can specify the style source for our book with this little icon right here. You can see that right now it's set as chapter 2. That's because I actually removed chapter 1. By default, the style source for your book is going to be the first file that you bring in. We can change that at any time just simply by clicking on this little area next to the file that we want to be the style source. I want to go ahead and set the style source to chapter 1 for right now. And let's go ahead and look down here. We've made some changes to this book. So we've got a button down here we can actually save the book, and as well as bring up the print dialog if we want to print our book to a local printer here. You can see if I go ahead and click that, we get the default print dialog. I'll go ahead and cancel that for right now. I'm not going to save this book just yet. What I'd like to do is go ahead and open up some of these files. Let me go ahead and open up chapter 1 for you here. And you can see here that chapter 1 looks exactly as it did when we had it open earlier in this lesson, but there's going to be a problem. Remember, I told you that each one of these chapters have been designed so that they should start on a right-hand page or an odd-numbered page. Now, in this case, you think about chapter 1, it ends on a right-hand page. So if the next chapter is going to begin on a right-hand page, what happens to that left-hand page in between? Well, let's look over here in the book panel, and you can see here that chapter 2 has been modified to begin on page 10. Well, that's something you really want to be careful of before you start bringing documents into a book file, is how the pagination needs to work. Let me go ahead and show you what the book file has done to our chapter 2. You can see here that chapter 2, it's actually reshuffled the data that's in that file so that it begins now on an even numbered page. You can see that the layout has actually been modified here. So we want to be really careful about bringing files into a book because it's really easy to actually overwrite your InDesign files with a change like this one that we may not have intended to make. Now, you may be wondering, how can we avoid a situation like this one? Let me go ahead and show you that. I'm going to go ahead and close these files out. I'll say no, and that I do not want to save the changes to them. Now, the really bad part about this is that if I go ahead and hit Control-O and open up that Chapter 2 file again, it looks like InDesign has actually overwritten that file and saved the changes to that file. Let me go ahead and close that out, and I'm going to go ahead and remove these files from my book just for a moment. Now, fortunately, I do have copies of these files saved, so what I'm going to go ahead and do is come over here to another screen, and we're going to bring in, and I'm going to overwrite those files in that Lesson 3 folder with the files we originally started with here. And once I've done that, let me just go ahead and drag those files in here. And you can see they've been restored to their original condition. So if I go ahead and Control-Tab through those, you can see that each one of them starts at page 1, and the data is back on that odd-numbered first page where it needs to be. So now that I've corrected those files, let me go ahead and close those out and come back over here to my book. Now, before I bring those files into the book, what I want to do is come over here to the panel flyout menu, and we need to look at the book page numbering options here. This is really important. This will keep the book panel from making unexpected changes to your design. So if we look here, you can see that by default, the book page numbering options are set to continue from the previous document. So one document, let's say that chapter 2, with these settings, it's going to continue on whatever page the previous document leaves off on, whether it's an odd numbered page or whether it's an even numbered page. I don't want that, so I'm going to go ahead and change this to continue on next odd page here. Now, if we continue that on the next odd page, I'm also going to go ahead and tell it to insert a blank page, in that case for the area between chapter 1 and 2. So what that'll do is it'll add a blank page at the end of chapter 1 so that it ends on an even numbered page rather than an odd numbered page. So with these settings changed here, let's go ahead and hit OK. Now we've made changes to that book. We can go ahead and come in and add those files back in. Let me go ahead and select chapter 1. I'll hold shift and select chapter 5. Add those back in here. So we've got those back in. Now notice the difference in the pagination. Every chapter is ending on an even numbered page now. Let me come in and double click on chapter 1 here. We can look here and see that at the end of chapter 1, a blank page has been added. Now, the interesting thing about this is if we select that and try and delete that page, InDesign's not going to let us do that because that page has been added so that this file conforms to the book page numbering settings set within the book panel here. So we can't delete those extra pages. But now if we come in and look at chapter 2, you can see that our first page, this title page, is actually on a correct page, an odd numbered page. And in this case, the chapter ends on an even numbered page, so we don't need the blank page. But chapter 3, it receives a blank page. Chapter 4, no blank page. And chapter 5 gets a blank page. Now, at this point, I think we're ready to go ahead and move on. So, in this lesson, we've learned how to create a book file here to manage all the documents that we want to keep together for this project. And we've also learned how important it is to actually make or set the book page numbering options for our book before we begin adding files to it. So in the next lesson, let's go ahead and move forward. We're going to learn about synchronization of the files in our book.